next really important thing that you need to learn about is leverage. Will it send you broke or make you wealthy? Leverage means buying a more expensive item than you would normally afford by using borrowed funds. You saw this in the last episode when a first home buyer used $100,000 to buy a $400,000 property like this one. That's leverage because the bank provided 80% of the money. The decision investors and first home buyers need to make is, do you borrow at 85%, 90 or even 95% so you can buy a property sooner, or even buy 2 properties instead of 1. Leverage can multiply your profits and losses. So while you stand to make a lot more money, you also risk losing more. Now, almost every property investor and property buyer uses leverage. What you need to decide is what's the right level of leverage for you. In other words, what level of risk are you comfortable with? And by the way, it may not be your call, because as soon as you ask the bank to borrow more than 80%, then the lending criteria gets much tougher. The banks consider taking a risk by lending you more than 80%, so an insurance policy is required to protect the bank, and you pay for it. It's called Lender's Mortgage Insurance, or LMI for short. The cost is nearly always added to the loan, but because of the LMI companies involved, they have a say in whether you qualify or not, and they're tougher than the banks. For example, you may be 3 months into a new job, probation's over, and the bank is happy to give you an 80% loan. But if you want to borrow above 80%, the LMI company might say you haven't been in the job long enough and knock you back. And there's really nothing you can do about it. And most first home buyers and investors leverage highly because it makes a difference between buying right now or waiting a long time while you save the bigger deposit. Some borrow at 95% because otherwise they'd never get in the property market. Now that's high leverage, and there is a risk with leverage, but there's advantages as well. Now let's look at 2 hypothetical investors. In the last episode, as I mentioned, we showed you how someone with $100,000 can buy a property worth $400,000. Let's call this person investor A. Let's assume now that they've got a twin brother, investor B, who only has $60,000. Assuming the same 80% loan, investor B can only buy a $240,000 property, which isn't nearly enough to get a quality one. But if they borrow at 90%, things change. Now they need just $60,000 to buy a $400,000 property. $40,000 for the deposit, $20,000 for purchase costs. They need even less in some states, since if they buy off the plan in Victoria, they'd only need $50,000 to buy the same $400,000 property as investor 1, half of the deposit. So if the first investor took 6 years to save the $100,000, the second investor can do it in just 3. All because of the power of leverage. But that leaves the first investor, investor A, with a decision to make. Do they use their deposit to buy 1 property or 2? What they decide really depends on their circumstances. A couple in their 50s who are close to retirement would answer that question differently to a young couple about to have a baby. Now, every borrower has to weigh up the balance between risk and reward. It's the same with leverage. The potential return from high leverage is easy to see. At 6% growth, a $400,000 property doubles in 12 years. You use leverage to buy 2 properties and the gain is $800,000. But the risk is also clear. If you buy 2 properties for $800,000 at 90%, the loan is going to be $720,000. So if the combined value drops below that, you have negative equity. And unfortunately, properties do drop in value from time to time because capital growth doesn't go in a perfect straight line. It goes up and down like the share market. So there you have it. Leverage is what makes property investing so powerful, but it's also what brings a lot of investors unstuck. And this is where understanding cash flow is vital. If a property drops in value, you need to make sure you can hang on to it until it goes back up to what you paid for it, and then keeps rising in value. Now we're going to discuss cash flow in more detail in another episode. When it comes to leverage, and particularly for people in their 50s, it's even more important to stick to safe, standard residential investment properties. If you lose a chunk of money at that stage in life, it's very difficult to replace it before you retire. We're going to discuss what kind of properties you need to buy and what to stay away from in the next episode. Now, as always, if you'd like, you can meet with us, hit the button on the right, and we'll be in touch. Tomorrow we're going to look at something really important. The formula to Australians on average incomes investing in property. Yes, there is a formula. Well, it's my formula anyway. And I think if you stick to it, you'll dramatically increase your chance of being successful and you'll lower your chance of failing. It's one not to miss, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow when we discuss all of that content and more. Bye for now.